good morning. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and welcome to today's webinar discussing all the different types of absenteeism that exist, how to manage it as business owners, business leaders, decision makers, obviously coming into holiday season, how that impacts us as our businesses, our teams, including the challenges, and hopefully some tips and ideas to overcome them. Hopefully you all know, I am Basha. I think you know me as Barbara or Basha. I prefer Basha. Kolosinska. I'm the Managing Director from C&M Travel Recruitment. Those of you that know us, we are 26 years old, been in the industry a long time. I've been in the industry for 30 years. We recruit for all sectors of the industry, tour ops, TMCs, OTAs, luxury, you name it, we do it. All disciplines, all levels. I am joined today, as you know, it is called now ABC, the A and the C of our ABC webinars, and I'll let you introduce yourselves, ladies. Over to the A.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully I don't need much of an introduction, but I'm Ami Naru, for those of you who don't know me. I'm a partner, head up the employment department here at Travlaw. We are a niche travel business, so that means all we do is act for the travel industry in all their legal needs. And as I said, I focus on the HR employment side and work very closely with Basha and Claire.
Thanks, Ami. Claire?
Hi, yes, good morning, everybody. I'm Claire Steiner, and I, by day, am an HR and talent professional with about 30 years in the HR industry, but probably the last 25 plus in predominantly travel and tourism. And I have a few other hats I wear, but for today, I'm all about HR.
Absolutely. And Claire and I also sit on the ITT board together as well. Forgot to also mention we are joined by Juliet Dennis. She's Chief Reporter from Travel Weekly, who will be covering today's session as well. So I'm sure there'll be some lovely articles, etc. So we'd like today to be really interactive. It's quite a fireside chat. Please post any questions into the chat and we'll get to them. Or just put your hands up as well if we can see your screen. So as we know, let's get cracking. As we know, there are pages of notes. We have many forms of absenteeism. It's not just sick, it's holiday, it's mat leave, pat leave, sabbaticals and so on. I think the first thing we'd like to do, we do have a few polls, there must be a reason why you're all here, i.e. you have a challenge managing it. You're moving into holiday season. How do you manage it? If you're a smaller business, I run a small business. I have 16 staff. Coming into holiday season is always a challenge. So I'd like to launch the first poll. And the first poll is, can you see this? Does your company find it a challenge to manage absenteeism, mat leave, holidays, and so on?
No.
Well, that's not a surprise, is it? I do as well. Okay, 90%, 10%. Okay. Right. There we go. 92% of you do. 85. There we go. I'm going to end poll and share the results. There we go. Can you see those
Pretty
results?
Convincing.
Sorry?
It's pretty convincing, isn't it? In terms
Absolutely.
of which way it lies in
Absolutely.
terms of, yeah.
Before we crack on, I do have some stats. These are actually from CIPD. This is mainly for sick. Employees were absent, this is last year, 2023, were absent for an average of just under 8 days over the past year, the highest sickness absence rate in a decade, and a significant increase from pre-pandemic. 76% of respondents reported stress-related absenteeism. Be interesting to see why that is. Long-term absence was primarily driven by mental health problems, 50%. Or anybody that's got their mic on, please turn it off because we can get a bit of feedback. Acute medical conditions, stroke, cancer, and so on. 70% of organisations offered occupational sick pay leave schemes for all employees. 82% provided an employee assistance programme, which is EAP. Some of you may have heard of that. And 53% had a standalone wellbeing strategy. But this isn't really about wellbeing today. It's about all types of absenteeism. But one figure, this came from Vitality, which is a healthcare provider, which we use here at C&M. Workplace sickness, not all absentees, just sickness, cost the UK just under 140 billion pounds last year, which is significant. So I'm wondering, with all the other types of absenteeism that exist, how much that impacts our business, our productivity, and so on. So let's get the ball rolling. Ladies, who'd like to start? Ami.
Yeah, I mean, I think that figure that you've just quoted is really interesting because that focuses just on sickness. And we will be aware from changes that happened in April this year. Carers leave came out. It's become much easier now to take paternity leave. And the one that gets forgotten about quite a lot is parental leave, where employees, once they've got a year's service, can take up to 4 weeks unpaid leave per year up to the child's 18th birthday, and that's capped at 18 weeks. And I'm seeing that increasingly being taken up. I've got a friend who's going interrailing with her children over the summer, so has taken 4 weeks parental leave. So I think the actual cost, if we add all of the different types of absences, it's going to be more like 200 billion, I would say, as off the top of my head. So it's quite substantial. It's really important that employers, irrelevant of their size, but more so when they are small, because there's less flexibility within the team, have clear communication on what can and cannot happen, and make sure that communication set out really early in the year. So not just 2 days before there's going to be a major, event, for example. So clear communication, have a policy, but also allow for a little bit of flexibility, because not everyone can plan at the start of January what annual leave they're going to need for the rest of the year.
Absolutely. Claire, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think I'd add in one thing, and Ami's just alluded to it, with the flexible working, which is time off for dependents as well. So that's for the emergency leave that, people will need. And it's dependents, not just childcare. So some people do have caring responsibilities, parents and stuff like that. So they might need to have emergency time off. And I think, you alluded to the smaller businesses, but for a business with 4 people in it, that's a quarter of your workforce off when they go off for 1 day. So, there is a substantial cost to the business, plus also an operational cost to business. We're used to managing holidays. We're used to being able to plan that. Most people are good at planning that so that, you don't have too many people off at the same time and all that sort of thing. But you can't allow for those emergencies as well. So I think for me, a lot of this is to do with how you, through communication, through the right policies, and making sure that your business is protected by having the right staffing and the right plans in place should you come, should something happen and suddenly half your workforce is not in the office on a Monday morning through a number of reasons.
And I think the other thing to add to that is not just about when people can take their time off, it's how much notice they need to give. So if you've only got 4 employees in your workforce and they're giving you 2 days notice, is that enough time to prepare for a handover? These are the sorts of things that you might want them to set out in an ideal world in a policy. We need, let's say, for example, 2 weeks notice, because it's not just the period of time that someone's physically away from the office, it's the lead up and also when they come back, and in terms of who's around and how much time it takes for them to catch up with work that they've missed whilst they've been off. We all know that when we come back, our inboxes are flooded, aren't they?
Yeah.
We're all going to start holding our hands up because we agreed on the last webinar that the 3 of us get so excited, and it's not intentional that we speak over each other. We just get very excited. So we're very aware that we do this audience.
So just for Juliet's purposes, you don't need to report on that last bit.
You're more than welcome. Yeah. Sorry, Claire, were you about to say something?
I kind of forgot what I was going to say there. No. I think, what I was going to say was that for smaller businesses, though, I think one of the pluses of smaller businesses is they tend to have much better communication anyway. So they're much better at supporting each other through that. And so the handovers and the time away is probably easier to manage in a smaller business in that respect. But of course, larger businesses have got more resources to help when people are off. So there's kind of, there's that yin and yang of small versus big, I would say. But I also wanted just to point out the reason we kind of got into this is, of course, we're coming into summer and the sporting season, and that in itself presents all sorts of challenges, particularly now England are through to the next stage in the Euros, and Wimbledon started yesterday. And the Olympics coming up.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's quite an interesting point. I'll go back to holidays in a minute, but how as businesses do we manage that, whether we are all remote and we know we've got a team of avid tennis lovers, football lovers. I mean, it doesn't affect the footballs now, not on during the week anyway, so that's fine. But how, if you are in an office, I know when we're fully remote now at C&M, but when we used to have offices and the football was on or any other sporting activity, what's the word, sporting event, we would have the screens on. But how does that impact productivity? If you are a retail shop, how can you do it then? So have you noticed that with clients? Do they have policies in place for these kind of things, both Ami and Claire?
I don't think they have formal policies in place as such. They do it on a case-by-case basis. I certainly know from us at Travlaw, when the One England match was on a working day at 5 o'clock, we did have it on in the office. But the interesting point is, and we encourage that because we want people to come into the office and the office to be a social, nice environment. But then, if we had a colleague, and we didn't, fortunately, on that particular day, but if we had a colleague who was working from home, would it then be acceptable to say, oh, do you know what, just go and sit and watch the football instead of working? There's a fine line, isn't there, between what's acceptable and what we are communicating when we do have a division of hybrid workers.
And I think it comes down to trust, doesn't it?
It's absolutely.
Team, what your policies are. Claire?
I think trust is a part of it. Other things I would say, though, I think is, for instance, what about people who aren't engaged, who aren't bothered by the football or the sports? Do they feel disenfranchised because they're not getting the same opportunities to go and watch, I don't know, their favourite soap in an afternoon because that's what they enjoy doing when it comes to TV? I also think with this world of hybrid working, whilst it's great to provide these opportunities for people to have this sort of social side in the offices, what about the people who are working from home? Now, a lot of people have said it's fine, people will have the radio on in the background, but how, it depends what's on, doesn't it? So, if you have someone who's required to be doing emails, concentrating, answering the phone, and there's something going on that demands a lot of their attention, as in a football match or a tennis tournament, or even a debate on the radio, actually, how do you manage that? How, trust is there. And for me, it all comes down to these communications and setting expectations. But again, you need to think about what does that mean for every single person in the organisation, not just the people who might say, listen, Basha, I'm a massive football fan and I support, I don't know, some different team that are on, late afternoon on Thursday. So could I take 2 hours off to watch that and I'll make the time up? And then 2 days later, someone comes to you and goes, oh, I'd like to go shopping for 2 hours on Thursday and I'll make the time up. What's the difference there? Yeah,
you do. That's quite interesting because I've got more stats. I like a stat that there's still quite a lot of people that are fully remote. We've got some stats here. 14% of Brits solely work from home. 26% of Brits work from home or either fully or hybrid, and that comes from the Office of National Statistics. The travel industry, 45% of all new roles, so this comes from our stats, 45% of all new roles are still hybrid, 35% of all new roles are fully remote, and that's in the travel industry. 20% of all new roles are fully office-based, and it hasn't really changed too much from last year, and Owen and I were quite surprised about that. I thought actually people, from what we're experiencing with our business partners and clients, they're wanting more people to come into the office, but the stats are showing actually it's probably about the same as it was last year. So that does have an impact, doesn't it? It does have an impact on how we manage our staff. Should we put with these policies, do you think we should be putting actual policies in place in their contracts? And do we have to abide by them, or is it just a guide, Ami?
I think you definitely, if you've got hybrid workers or home workers, you definitely need a policy, because the policy covers many, many things that we've talked about before, such as, whether they've got the right insurance in place, about confidential information. So certainly in that respect, but do we need policies on specific sporting events? Let's just focus on.
Yeah.
I don't think we need a policy per se, but what we do need is clear communication. Because, going back to the example that, if you've got football on a screen and everyone's getting pizzas and they're not actually physically doing any work, it's more of a team bonding session, then what is the communication that's being communicated to the person who sat working at home? Oh, you can do the same, or no, because you're not in the office, you have to sit and work. And I think it's, for some employers, this isn't even an issue, because they have adopted policies coming out of the pandemic, which is work when you want, we don't care as long as the work is done, which is fine, going back to Claire's point, but not in all circumstances if you have to be sat there answering the phone. You can't just say, I'm going to make those 2 hours up later this evening, but there might be nobody ringing on the phones 2 hours later this evening. So yes and no in terms of policies, but I think in terms of sporting events, you've got to deal, when they're major, okay, they've got to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. And for anyone that's following the England team, this European Championships, most of the matches are at the weekends or in the evening, so it shouldn't really impact the majority of the workforce, unless you've got shift workers, that are on ground working in airports, for example, who it must be
out of hours people.
Yeah, exactly,
So
yeah.
It'd be interesting to find out if any of the audience have experienced this, or have had issues with dealing with staff that want to go and watch the football, the tennis, etc., or some that don't. So if you have, then please just write a comment in the chat box and we'll answer it. Claire, do you have any more to say on that?
Yeah, I think, again, it's all down to communication, but I think other things to think of, for instance, yes, we're lucky that the matches, the Euros in Europe, as is the Olympics, so there's not those sort of huge time differences we need to deal with, which can impinge on the working day. However, if England finally has a really decent match and plays really well, and everyone gets really excited on a Sunday night, a few sore heads the next morning, how present are they going to be? Do you have people bringing in sick? And again, it's not just about these matches, because you may have had people who are like, right, the Euros are on, I'm going to be really well organised, it doesn't matter in the evening, I'm going to make sure I'm off on that Monday just in case I decide to have a big celebration. So you've got people who've booked off and booked their holiday for exactly that, and you will have people who do that, but then you have the people who ring in sick, or then you might have the people going back to what we were saying around parental leave that might actually have child emergencies, maybe their nursery care or their nanny was up till really late watching the football and rings in sick, so they then get some bitches. There's all these different things that you have to deal with, and it is, and I'm talking about extremes here, but these things do happen. So again, what contingencies are you putting in place to deal with this? And a lot of that's down to how you manage it. Sorry,
it's difficult when you've only got 4 people.
Yeah,
isn't it?
And I think even not focusing so much on the aftermath of the sporting event, I do probably on average get asked, or this issue arises nearly around every World Cup, is when someone's called in sick, but then they're seen on social media down the pub watching the football, or even we did have one instance where someone was spotted on TV, and it was a music event rather than a sporting event. I mean,
Glastonbury is a good example.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, you're very unlucky, aren't you, given the size of the crowd at Glastonbury, to get spotted on TV, but it does happen, and those situations are clear conduct, because someone is not genuinely sick in that situation, that they're using that as a reason to take a day off work, and you would go down the normal disciplinary route with that. And I don't think you should be afraid to do that, because you need to set a very clear example to the wider workforce that this is not acceptable.
Yeah. And that actually also leads us on to sick. What is classed as sick? Can people call in sick when they're working? Well, if they're just working from home, they're feeling a bit poorly. I'm actually feeling a bit poorly, but I will still work. What do we do as sick? I mean, we pay, we when people are off, we still pay their sick. Our sickness is very, very low, but that's another point. It is, where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line where you pay them or you don't pay them? Or again, does that go down to the contracts that you have in place with your
I think your health and safety obligations are still there, regardless of whether staff are working from home or from the office. And if someone is genuinely ill, they shouldn't really be being encouraged to continue to work whilst working from home, because all you're going to do is build up a problem down the line where someone suffers with burnout, for example. And I think that's the thing that gets muddied in the waters a little bit, that employers sometimes think, well, if they can lie in bed and do some work, then that's okay. And their health and safety obligations are a little bit more relaxed because someone's working at home. They're not. You still have that duty of care to your staff.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. And I think, we call it chucking a sickie, don't we? That's still a phrase that's used. But I think the whole pandemic and hybrid working has further muddied it if we didn't have enough nightmare coming out of all of that. And I think the thing is that many people now are saying they want people to come into the office on certain days, right? So they have all the team in. But if actually on that day you really can't be bothered and you say, I'm not feeling well, I'm not going to come into the office, I'm going to work from home, and they are working, but just because they just didn't want to get on a train and come into the office. Yeah, again, you have that duty of care, but you might have a deadline and you need those people to be working. And again, it's how do you balance that? I'm with Ami. I think you need to be very clear that sick means sick. And also, not all companies are very generous when it comes to sick pay. Some companies, if it's the odd day here and they'll go, don't worry. Others will go SSP only. And actually, you've got to remember, at the moment, this could all change this week, but at the moment, you have to have had, you don't get any pay until you've got 4 days off sick continuously together, and then you get statutory sick pay, which isn't very much. So for those people, there is a toss-up as well, if you are on SSP, as to whether or not they will actually get pay for that day that they decide that they're going to work from home, they're going to be off sick, working from home. And I think, again, you have to make this very clear in your policy what that means. So you have a duty of care as an employer, health and safety and all that is, if you're sick, you're sick. But for those companies that have sick policies whereby they pay, up to, say, 6 weeks in a year of sickness, full pay, you need to have those sort of things. Again, and this is why policies are important, to say, however, we reserve the right to not pay sick pay.
I think it's interesting about sick pay, because having drafted a lot of sickness policies for big, large, small companies in the travel industry, I would say that those who pay enhanced sick pay, so over and above statutory sick pay, are still in the minority. I don't know if you agree with that, Basha. But also,
sorry, you cut out a little bit, Ami. Then say that the SME.
I'm saying that it's in the minority that the travel industry pay over and above SSP in terms of, saying enhanced sick pay. And I think there's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because if staff know that they're going to get paid sick pay,
they might take advantage.
Well, they might actually take the day off sick instead of working. But it's also, the thing is, if you do offer sick pay, I've worked for some very, very, big employers outside the travel industry. If you think about the Royal Mail and Tesco's of this world, who do give enhanced sick pay, but their employees thought that was an entitlement to 5 extra days leave, you see. And so, when you put them on attendance procedures, improvement plans, like, but it's my right to take 5 days leave. No, it's not your right. It has to be so you have to be very clear in how you manage that as well. Sorry, Claire, I'll just say something now. Going back to the trust and the communication, we do, because that's how I believe I should look after my staff. But you're running the post office and you give full pay or whatever it is, that has a massive impact on the bottom line. Imagine the amount of days you're still paying where no productivity happens. So it's very, very difficult to manage. And I'm very lucky that I've never had a day of sick in my life, so I've never taken advantage of it. So I'm sure Owen would agree that we don't have a lot of sick at C&M, but most of our clients only offer SSP, really. Yeah.
Claire.
Yeah, 2 points I'd add to that. One, and Ami said about the double-edged sword. So the thing is, if you do only play SSP, you will therefore then potentially have people who to come to work even though they're sick because they can't afford a day's to lose a day's wages. So that in itself is an issue, because again it alludes to health and safety, and when we're going through another flush of COVID up at the moment, aren't we? And if people are struggling to go, and they're going into the office because that's the day, because they don't because you've made that policy, and then they're spreading COVID throughout the office. So there's all these different things. But what I would say, and I've seen this with clients outside of the travel industry and not really within, is that a lot of companies are allowing these sort of 1 or 2 days a year to do whatever you want to do days. We called them duvet days in the past, but again, it's like, we're going to give you, and it could be, a lot of companies doing it as volunteering days and they're having specific things. But what they're saying is, we're going to give you 2 days a year when no questions asked what you're going to do, and they will be paid. And that seems to be working quite well in these companies, because not everyone uses them, and most people actually bank them. They don't want to use them for, I can't be bothered to come into work because I'm feeling a bit tired this morning. They're like, I want to save this because I want to use them for something proper. So I think those sorts of things we need to start thinking about more. And Ami, I don't know if you're seeing that anymore. And Bash, I know you already have these volunteering days, but that seems to be something that I think we should be looking more at as an industry.
Yes. Looking outside the box. I think we mentioned it on not the last webinar before, but yeah, absolutely. Volunteering days, giving something back. We give well-being days as well, but we have to have notice. I don't know if you're saying, Claire, that these kind of do whatever you do want to do days, you call in that morning, or do you have to pre-plan them?
Well, traditional duvet days were literally that.
Morning.
They were exactly that. They were, woke up in the morning, I just want to stay under my duvet. And that's where they got their name from. So there is a blend of that versus, the sort of two days volunteering wellbeing days. And again, I think that's down to you as a business and you to do communications with your staff about how this works. You could maybe split it. You say one of those days could be a last minute, and the other one could be has to be planned. I think that's the thing. I think, as a business, there's no law about this, but what you do need to do is you need to actually have the rules in place so that people are very clear of what this means and how it works.
Sorry, I should have put my hand up. I apologise. Clear communication is really vital. I'm not seeing so much duvet days, but wellbeing days are normal now. They are pretty much standard practice, whether that's 1 day or 2 days, and volunteering days. And those wellbeing days, if someone wants to sit there all day and watch Wimbledon, then that's fine. That might, forever, for whatever they want to do. But it's making sure that they don't just dropping this on you at the last moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Which actually brings us on to holidays. And I do want to talk about some other things as well, because it's not just holidays and sick, but I think we mentioned at the beginning the maternity and parental care. But before we go on to sort of the holiday entitlement that we're finding, what other absenteeism exists?
Adoption leave, paternity leave, parental leave, time off for dependents, carers leave, shared parental leave.
Paternity, maternity, that is in parental leave, but there are different types, aren't there? And I think people need to understand. I think a lot of people are very aware of paternity, maternity, adoption leave, maybe time off for dependents, but not many people are aware of shared parental leave and what that could mean. And certainly I find parental leave, unpaid parental leave, is a bit of a shock to a lot of people.
Yeah. Time off dependence is essentially to deal with an emergency situation. Okay. Shared parental leave is when the parents can swap who takes mat leave effectively and get paid maternity pay or shared parental pay. Parental leave is the one that I alluded to before, which is unpaid. You can have 18 weeks up to the child's 18th birthday, but you can't take more than 4 weeks per year. Now you have to offer that as a statutory right. You can postpone the leave. There is a very, very small minority of employers who will make a contribution during that leave, but that's, I can't even count on one hand how many employers I know that offer some part of payment during parental leave.
I'm sure that's actually all the various types of leave that you've just mentioned. It's not news to me, but I definitely didn't know all about them before we started talking about that, and I'm sure some of the audience has said the same.
No, but I think it's worth mentioning, Basha, that more and more employees are becoming aware of what they can take and what their rights are. So do not be surprised if you get requests for things and you think, oh,
that's new.
yes.
Well, holidays, we know that we did a session on that, didn't we? All the holiday entitlement that's changing. We do have another poll talking about holidays, and then we can sort of delve into it a little bit deeper. Let me go into the poll, and the next poll is regarding formal holiday leave policy. Just like to know whether your company has a formal holiday leave policy in place. We do, but we do skirt around it quite a lot. For example, the teams, only 2 maximum out of each team allowed out in one go, but quite often there's 3 because we have a lot of parents that want to be off during August. But as long as the manager is happy to juggle it, or I get involved because I'm child free, so I can help out, and because we're a team and we're very close, we all get involved. But I appreciate you might be a smaller team, or we actually might be a bigger team or bigger organisations. It might not be as easy. There we go. Can you see the results there?
Yeah.
87% have a policy, 13% don't, which is also quite interesting. So we'll go more into the sort of holiday and holiday leave, but just to let everybody know, the expectations from candidates has definitely increased. Where a couple of years ago, 20 days plus bank holidays, absolutely not. The norm is really probably 22 to 25 days plus bank holidays now. And when we get any roles on with our clients and they're saying 20 days plus banks, it just doesn't cut it with candidates. Their expectations are that is really the norm now. And I don't know if that's what you're finding, both Ami and Claire.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the impression that's given then is if you're only offering the statutory minimums in terms of holiday, you're probably going to only offer the statutory minimums in respect of everything else as well. 22 to 25 seems to be the norm, plus the 8 bank holidays. So that takes you up to,
33.
Between 33 days, doesn't it? I think if you want to be on a competitive playing field, then that's what you should be really looking at. Don't have to, but yeah.
We all work in the travel industry. We all love the travel industry. People like going on holiday. I mean, what I have introduced into my business, because I have a lot of my members of staff that have been with us a long time, 10, 15, 20 years, that once they get to 25 days, they start at 22. Once they get to 25 days, which is after 2 years, an extra day. Once they get to 10 years, they get an extra day, take them to 26. Once they get to 15 years of service, they go to 27. And once they reach 20 years, and I do have a fair few, it's 28 days holiday plus their bank holidays, which does seem excessive, but I think for 20 years worth of service and loyalty, I think that's the least I could do, and they absolutely love it and relish it.
That's becoming increasingly popular to reward loyalty by enhanced holiday leave.
Yeah, and I think especially in our industry, I mean, listen, we all love to travel, whether you're back office or you're actually in a front office position, which you might actually travel as part of your job. It's still really important. And I think, again, this is a fairly simple way of rewarding loyalty. Yes, it has got cost implications to the business, but actually, if you base that against the lack of recruitment you've had to do, for instance, and I know, Bash, you're well aware of the cost of recruiting.
Absolutely. No, because it
actually makes fiscal sense, right? So there's just little ways of enhancing that and making you more. And I bash on all the time about employer branding and what makes you an attractive employer. And these are exactly the sorts of things that we need to be doing. And actually, what's interesting is I'm starting to see more, not quite as much in travel, but definitely out of travel, is enhanced parental benefits as well. So, we know, for instance, that women, we need to encourage more women into the workplace. And actually, childcare has always been a massive issue around that. So enhanced payments for maternity leave, returning to work bonuses for maternity, people who've been on maternity, enhanced parental leave in terms of paternity. So at the moment, men only have 2 weeks of statutory paternity leave, which isn't much money, but actually these are other ways of rewarding staff. And again, it's costs to the bottom line versus goodwill costs as well. And I think, you know, as businesses, or we're struggling with recruitment, we need to encourage particularly more women returners into the workplace. Enhancing maternity benefits is a big thing. And actually, I mean, Bash, you know, I'm like you. I don't have any young children. I don't have that to worry about. But actually, I see that as a real benefit. And I think, you know, when I was certainly younger in my career, and still thinking about families and stuff, that would have been really attractive for me.
Absolutely. And we're lucky we don't have to travel during school holidays. Sorry, Ami.
It works two ways as well. It's not just a retention tool for your existing staff who might be thinking of starting families, but also attracting staff. You know, if everything else is equal and you've got one employer saying, yeah, you know, we offer X, Y, Z, and the other employer, well, we offer statutory. It's what's going to differentiate you apart. And it is, those sorts of things are important to certain individuals as well. But yeah, let's not get around the fact that juggling the long summer holidays as a working parent, whether you're male or female, is an absolute nightmare.
And actually, I just want to add, I've just been doing a renewed flexible working from home policy for a non-travel client. So we'll say this, but one of the things they've made it very clear in this policy, and this goes back to the reasons why you have a policy, is just to make it clear that working from home is not a substitute for childcare.
Yes,
and
it is. Yeah, and you have to be clear about that. But there are some situations where, you know, you might have teenage children or children, you know, who are at high school, who can be in the house, and you can carry on working absolutely fine. And that's very different to having, you know, toddlers running around in the background and you trying to work from home. That's just not going to work, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Bash has been kicked out, so you and I are going to have to wing it now and be hostesses with the mostesses. I'm sure she'll be.
Well, we always wanted the power, didn't we?
No. Listen, I think you're right, Ami. And you know, the whole working from home, again, it's about this presenteeism. Is what we were talking about with the TV on in the background and the radio on in the background. If you are able to work from home without too many distractions, i.e., you've got teenage children or, you know, pre-teen teenagers who are quite happy working on their own, versus a football match or a toddler running around, then that, you know, how present are you going to be in your job? And again, it's just about managing these expectations, communicating what you expect from your staff, and, you know, and hopefully therefore everyone's starting on a similar playing pitch. And again, you know, I'm you know, much as I are very conscious and very aware of the need to support parents in the workplace, the non-parents as well need to be thought of. And sometimes they might be a bit, well, they get away with it, they can work from, you know, and again, it's just these sorts of messages and these sorts of issues that can arise if you're not very clear about what is happening.
It's really interesting because you will find very organised parents will plan the whole annual leave in January. Okay, less organised like me, I'll just go with a wing and a prayer, but never mind. And then that does, you know, leave the situation where, say, for example, peak periods of annual leave, which tend to be summer and Christmas, where other members of staff say, but I want to take this time off. And, you know, employers are like, well, so-and-so's already got it in already. So, you know, in terms of your holiday policies, you need to think about what policy are you adopting? Is it first come, first served? Do you have a rota system where so many people, you know, can only have the Christmas week off, for example? Do you have minimum staffing requirements? Or do you have blockout periods where no one's allowed to take holiday? And those are the sorts of things that you need to build into your policies. And policies aren't just about how many days leave you can take per year. It's much more than that. It's about how you operate as a business in the lead up, during, and after someone's on leave.
Absolutely.
I'm really sorry I got knocked out. Did you notice?
We did, don't worry. We were enjoying ourselves.
I don't know what happened. Apologies for that. Okay.
No, that's fine. No, and I think you're right, Ami, and I think it's just making sure that everybody's treated fairly and equitably and reasonably, isn't it? So, you know, again, it covers off everybody. So if you have parents who've been very well organised and they've booked their 2-3 weeks in the summer holidays, you know, partly parental leave, partly their own holiday to go off and do stuff with the children, and then you have someone who comes to you last minute and goes, I've just scored tickets to the closing games of the Olympics in Paris, please can I have those 3 days off? And you look at it and you go, oh, how do we manage this? You know, can we manage it? Is it, you know, you want to try and do it? You know, so again, you need to have that slight flexibility, element of flexibility in your policies as well, so that it is that not one size fits all. And also, again, absolutely honest, if they're a good member of staff, they're a loyal member of staff, they don't have much time off, they always pay the game, you're much more likely to want to try and work with them to help them through this thing than someone who is off sick on a regular basis and doesn't have that similar sort of loyalty.
And if you continue to do that, people will see that, and they're like, do you know what, I'm not going to have lots of sick. I am going to put the hours in. I am going to because what goes around comes around. I mean, I think that's probably easier in smaller businesses to have that sort of culture. But I absolutely agree. I think running a small business myself, you treat your staff well, and it will be returned tenfold by loyalty, hard work, and productivity.
And it's very rare that you'll hear this from a lawyer saying policies are all very well and good. They are. You do need to have them, but you've also got to treat people like humans. So, given that example that Claire's just given, if someone's just magically got some tickets for the final of the Euros or whatever, are you really going to deny them? Because what sort of bad will and goodwill is that going to create depending on the decision that you make?
Mariam she put her hand up. Is she still here? Would you like to? Mariam, hello. Unmute yourself. Would you like to ask a question or make a point? Hello, lovely to see
Hi,
you.
I'm from Complexity Travel. I know
Hello.
Ami. Hi, Ami.
Hi.
Just a quick question on the working from home and children. So what happens if someone's working from home and then the child is sick? Now, do they have to tell us? Or if we find out, what's our position and they haven't told us?
I think, do you want me to go first on this one, Claire? Yeah. I think if the child is sick and it's interrupting their ability to do their job, then yes, they have a duty to tell you because they cannot do their job. Okay. If the child is sick, they might have a 16-year-old who says, I've got a headache, and they just want to watch Netflix all day, and it's not affecting their ability to do their job. Then you've got to deal with it on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. So toddlers, they have to tell us.
I think if you've got a sick toddler who is clingy and wants to lie on you, and you have to, and you can't do your work unless you're physically laid there with a toddler and then the laptop on top of the toddler, it's not. You can't really, do work in that way, can you? And I think employees have to be open and honest with their employers, because that's the only way that the employers will deal fairly with them, and it's about trust and respect, isn't it?
Okay. And on that, another question, sorry. So if someone is a permanent working from home individual, they basically chauffeur their children here, there, and everywhere. Do they have an obligation to tell us if they're leaving the workspace to go and do that?
That's a really good question, Mariam. And I know many of my friends in travel and myself as well. A lot, we're all remote. A lot of my team have got children, but they always say XYZ is going to be working at home today. They're not poorly, but I don't know, they've got an inset day or something like that. So tell me, and then we make the decision as to whether they're going to be working. So that's a really good question. I'd like to know the answer of that as well. Amy.
I can answer this one, Claire, unless you want to go first.
No, you go first and I'll add in.
Okay. I think if you've got a policy of what you can work when you want, where you want, and make up the hours, then that's not really a problem. If you've got, you must be at work between X hours and Y hours, and they are wanting to take a break out of those hours, then they need to tell you. They need to ask permission for that, in the same way as if they were sat in the office working 9 to 5, and someone turned around to you, Mariam, and said, I need to go and pick X up from wherever and drop them off at Y. They'd have to ask you permission to do that, because they are physically visible, and that's no different, I don't think, if they're working from home, unless you've got a policy which says work whenever you want.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same thing. I think for me, it's definitely down to the communication. Yes, you should treat working from home as if you're working at the office. It shouldn't be about physically being present. Also going back to just the point you made earlier, Mariam, about the toddler at home. I think, again, if you talk to talk to your thing, say, look, my child's are sick, they are tired, and and I'm going to try and work today, but if I can't work and they get really bad, I will call you and let you know, and you deal with that under the time off for dependents. But again, it's just having those conversations. It could be that actually of the 8 working hours, they could work 7.5 hours over that day and just have to have that extra half, 10 minutes here and there to deal with the child. So again, it's just about having those staff and that trust, as Basha and Ami have said, around just call us, and because we would rather, let's face it, as an employer, you would rather they did as much of their work as possible than have the entire day off.
Of course.
That's what you'd want to do. So again, it's just making sure you have those lines of communication open. And certainly I've had situations where staff have done that. They've rung in and said, this has happened, I want to work, but I may be interrupted, is that okay?
Okay.
Answer your question.
Great
Yes,
question. Thank you, Miriam.
Yeah, thank you.
Good
Really
question.
good question. Please do fire away any more questions or put them into the chat box. What about long term? I don't know if we covered this while I was off. I don't think, because I think we're talking about holidays. Sorry for the 20 seconds I was off. What about long term sick? Long term, when we have got, unfortunately, I've had it in my business. A member of staff was off long term sick. Unfortunately, did pass away from cancer. But what about that? How obviously you've got your policies in place, but how best to manage that in regards to statutory, sick pay, but also managing the business that person should be doing?
Ami, do you want to do this, or shall I?
Yeah, well, I was going to, but I keep feeling like I'm jumping in front of you.
No, it's great.
Go for it, Claire, and I'll chip in afterwards.
Okay, so as we were saying, most travel companies tend to have statutory sick pay only. So there is an effect there, because statutory sick pay only lasts for 26 weeks. So that's only 6 months. I think, again, it's a duty of care. So how do you look after that staff? I think there are 2 things here. One is how you manage the business with someone off on long term. So it's how you communicate that, have the team bring them in. Do you have temporary staff?
You can't replace the person, can you? You can't replace
You
them.
can't. No, you can't. Depending, and also most long-term sicks, if they really are truly long-term, you'll kind of have a bit of an idea of how long potentially it can last, right? So God forbid, and it's awful, what happened with you with the cancer and everything, but it may be someone's got a broken leg, so they can't, or broken arm, so they can't type, or whatever it is. So there's those sorts of things, and how you can work with it. And then it's how you look after that person as well. So what you can't be doing is ringing them every 5 minutes, but again, you need to have that kind of, how do you communicate with them? How do you keep them up to date? Because if let's hope, that they are going to come back to work and all's going to be well, it's a bit like with maternity leave, keeping in touch days that you have legally. How do you don't have that as part of sick leave, but how do you make sure that when they do come back to work at the end of it, they effectively are almost onboarded again and brought back up into the business again? Because we know about women coming back into the work after long maternity leaves and the need to get them back into the business well, but the same could be said for long-term sick. So I think there are a few things you need to think around long-term sick. So I think there's that, the business itself, there's the pay side of it, and how you support staff, and how you look after them and bringing them back into the business. Ami, over to you.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, I mean, I would say it's a coincidence, but it's amazing how many times someone does a miraculous recovery when enhanced sick pay runs out, and all of a sudden they're back and fit and ready to come back to work.
That's such a cynical answer.
It is, but you know what? I've been doing this job a long time. I've seen a lot. Okay. So having said that, I think the worst thing that you can do is just ignore these people, because as a business, you're probably thinking, well, they're not getting any pay, they ran out of SSP. So, well, I'll just come back. Yeah. And I have had clients ring me up and say, we've got this person, they've been on sick leave for 2 years, what should we do with them? And the reason they're ringing is because they're at a position where they're about to sell the company, so it's become an issue. Okay, that's the worst thing to do. Clear lines of communication and agree what's acceptable in terms of communication. So Claire will know this. There have been cases where employees have felt harassed by their employer because their employers constantly bombarding them saying, when you're coming back, and have you done this appointment and that appointment? But in practice, dealing with long-term absence is not easy, and it often results in having to get a medical report on the individual to see what the likelihood of return to work is. Because if there's no likelihood of return to work, then unfortunately you're just in delaying the inevitable, which is this is going to be a termination on grounds of capability. So yeah, they're not easy, but they do need to be managed, those types of situations.
And Tony
Yeah.
Graham has just commented in the chat box. That's a really good point. I recently was off for 3 months of lung cancer. My goodness, Tony, I'm sorry. And I had partial lung resection. I came back on a phased return, but still
Yeah.
feel like I'm playing catch up even now. I will certainly hope you're on the you're in recovery, Tony. But that's a really fair point as well, isn't it? I mean,
And I think just to add to that, I think if someone has been on long-term sick, and how do you define what's long-term sick? Okay, it's going to depend on case-by-case basis, but anything over a few weeks, I would start to think, you do need to look at a phased return to work of some sort, because otherwise you are again failing your duty of care in terms of health and safety as well. And you could potentially exacerbate somebody's condition by forcing them back to work very quickly, too soon. And particularly in situations where it's long-term sickness because of a mental health issue or stress or depression.
And as the stats that I gave at the beginning, that's one of the major reasons why why there was so much sick last year, not just in the travel industry, but in the UK wide. So yeah, mental health and stress.
Yeah, and I think, I just sort of muddied the water a bit further. I think it's back in the day, in the 30 years I've been doing this, you used to get quite good reports from the doctors. The doctors would be helping you manage those circumstances and would often say phased return to work, and this is what they'd say. And we mentioned about occupational health assessments, so those help. Some are good, some aren't so good, so that depends on obviously who you go to, but their recommendations as to how you can reintegrate them back into the workforce. But I think the muddy of the waters now has been the pressure that the NHS is under for people getting doctor's appointments on that respect, and people being able to go to their pharmacy and get a pharmacist to write a sick note. Kind of, again, that just means that you need, as an employer, to really look at how you're going to properly manage and look after these people effectively to help them come back into the workforce, and also monitoring their sickness as well, because with being a bit cynical like Ami, there are certain conditions, I won't say which ones necessarily, which can be very catch-all. I just don't want to go to work for 3 weeks, so this is an easy one for me. To actually, I have a serious issue, and it's called the same thing, and you have to, again, you can't be accusatory. You have to look at every sickness is absolutely genuine, but what does that mean for you as a business, and what does that mean for your relationship with those people, and how you communicate that? Would you agree, Ami?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think just one additional point that, it's a misconception that employers have is if someone is off with stress or depression or a mental health type.
Or menopause, we haven't thrown that in here.
Or
That's
any sort of condition like that, then if they are sick, they should be sat at home. That's not true, okay? People can be out, even go on holiday, because it might assist their recuperation or their recovery, and that's been shown through case law. So don't just jump to conclusions in that respect.
Interesting.
And just to add on the other side of that, also just a point to remember for those who may not know, or should, or just to remind them, that if you are on holiday and you go off sick and you have a proof of your sickness, you will get your holiday back.
But you must tell your employer.
But you must tell your employer within a certain amount of time. Most contracts of employment will say these days, but normally it's within 2 to 5 days of returning from holiday. You will inform the employer that you were off sick during that, and most times the employer will require some kind of proof that you were off sick, which means that that if you come with a fit note, or something from maybe the hotel doctor or whatever it is, to say you were in bed off sick, then you will get your holiday returned to you.
And I know we're coming up close to 12 now, but there is one big point that flows on from that, Claire, is if someone is on long-term sick leave, their annual leave, their holidays accrue whilst they are off, because they are on sick leave and not on annual leave. And the whole point of having annual leave is for you to get rest and recuperation from the workplace. So that's something important to bear in mind, that, you know, if you've got someone who's been off 6 months or a year, when they come back, they will potentially have 6 months or a year's worth of annual leave that's accumulated.
A bit like mat leave.
Yeah, exactly. A
mat
bit like mat leave. And so that might be a good idea to factor into any phase return, which is okay. Come back 2 days a week and, you know, take 3 days a week annual leave, and so factor that in as well.
Yeah, I have a young lady who, she's actually not that young, but she's coming back from mat leave end of this year, and now we're just calculating how much holiday and bank holiday she's due, which they usually just end up taking another month at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Paid,
but it's important to put that into your maternity policies as well, because, you know, some employers say you've got to take it all when you come back immediately after you've turned from mat leave. Some say you can take it when you want. Some mat policies don't even say that you need to take the largest chunk of the annual leave for that holiday year prior to you going off on mat leave before you go. So you could have a situation, if you haven't made it clear, where someone's accumulated the annual leave for the year in which they take mat leave and don't take it, and then it rolls into another year as well. So they come back with, you know, quite a sizable chunk of mat leave.
Yeah.
Sorry, not mat leave, annual leave.
Annual leave.
Yeah, and then some, and Ami, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's also some people can apply to have some of that paid as well, can't they, when they come back? So they could say, actually, I'd like to
3 days instead of 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Lovely. I think that's it. We done?
Lots of food
Anything
for
else
thought.
you want to discuss? We all good? Yeah.
There's always more to discuss, but hopefully we've hopefully covered off the main points.
I know we try and set it to an hour. We put an hour and a half in, but we try and stick to an hour. From those in the audience, I hope that's covered a lot of the things that you wanted us to discuss. If there's any other questions, please stick them in the chat box. But thank you, Tony. Very informative. Thank you very much.
And Tony, I hope you are well on the way to 100% recovery.
Absolutely.
Speedy recovery to you. So once again, we finished one of our webinars. Thanks so much to the A, to my B and C, Ami and Claire. Really, really appreciate your time. Thanks, Samantha. We will be recording this set. It has been recorded. We're giving it out to you. Apologies for my slight glitch where I just went off. I don't know what happened there. We hope to see you at an event or one of our webinars in the very near future. And also just watch this space, because we will have some exciting news about ABC Live going on the road. And that's all we're going to say about the matter. But yes, that is it. So thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate your time. We know you're all very, very busy. We hope it was informative, thought-provoking. And if you have any more questions from a employment law, recruitment or HR perspective, then we will put all our emails on the email that we send you to thank you and with the recording. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
See you all very soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.